following is a fan-based discussion, and all materials being discussed are owned by Toei, Hasbro, and Super Productions. I claim no ownership to the materials being discussed and it's purely fan opinion. Hello everyone and welcome to the first ever episode of the Toku FanimeX reviews. As my last video, I talked about my top picks for Super Sentai. As such, I'm starting off my first ever review with Super Sentai. And what better Sentai show to start off with than the one that has gotten its 20th anniversary film not too long ago as of the time of this recording. That's right. I present to you Episode 1, Emergency, Tokusou Sentai Dekaranger. Now, all my Sentai reviews and pretty much all my Toku reviews are going to follow the more or less the same structure with talk about the opening first, then the plot breakdown, then characters, and then my final thoughts. And how my schedule for Sentai is going to work. From this point onwards, I'll go in chronological order. So Dekarangers first, as this episode is on Dekaranger. Then the next Sentai review will be on Magi Ranger, then Bokenger, and etc. etc. And once I'm like up to date with Sentai, like up to the most recent Sentai that's fully aired, I'll start going back to this point, but this time in reverse order. So it'll be Arbor Ranger, then Hurricane Ranger, then Down Ranger, etc. etc. That's basically how my schedule for Super Sentai is gonna work. Now, without further ado, let's start off this review with the opening. This opening is one of the best. I'm sure a lot of you agree with me. This opening is awesome. Like the energy it has, the lyrics, and the countdown part, or rather count up in this case. 1, emergency. 2, Dekaranger. 3, action. 4, perfect. 5, get on. What's there to say about this opening? It's just a great opening, a great song. And the ending theme is also good. This is like one of the few sentences that has both an awesome opening and an awesome ending. I usually don't care enough about the ending to talk about them, but just to know, I really like this ending. But without further ado, let's get into the actual main plot of the show. Now, here's something I need to clarify first. This show doesn't really have an overarching plot compared to a lot of other Sentais, mainly because this show doesn't have a villain group for the show to revolve around. And pretty much it goes by case, aka an episodic plot. More like an episodic show, just like how a typical cop show goes. It's a case with a different criminal, and then a case with a criminal, and then a case with a criminal. Like, this show does have serialized elements, don't get me wrong, because certain parts that happen in earlier episodes, they do lead to something, or they do get brought up later on. But most of the time, this is a very episodic show, which it works. I don't have a problem with that here. It works. I'm not saying a serialized story can't work with this, but I feel like an episodic nature might work, as because it's more episodic, it helps to develop the cast, which is why the Dekarangers is basically one of my favorite teams out there. It's not only one of my favorite Sentais because let's be real, it is one of the best Sentais out there, but it also features one of the best teams out there, at least in my opinion. So with this plot, I'll be mainly talking about episodes that basically feature the debut of basically an addition to their arsenals, like debut of mechs, debut of new rangers, or in some cases maybe in some Sentais maybe the return of older characters and stuff like that, pretty much. For the episodes that provide like significant development to some of these cast members, I'll talk about them once I talk about their characters. Now, without further ado, let's get into the plot. Start off with episodes 1 and 2, because this show starts off with a two-parter. Now, episode 1. At the very start, we see basically a giant police car chasing a criminal, an alien criminal. Which, first thing you need to know, the villains in this show are called alienizers, which are basically alien criminals. And he more or less and he more or less he thinks he kills him when he seemingly runs him off the road. And the one driving this giant police car is called Bon Akaza. And he starts off extremely reckless, partially because he's a rookie at this point. Even though he seemingly kills the analyzer, which he doesn't here, he ended up, because he's reckless, he ended up causing a lot of destruction, which included almost running over the guests of a wedding ceremony that was happening at the same time as he was chasing the analyzer, and which almost got him fired. But instead, he got transferred to the Earth branch, and of course, the next thing we switch over to Earth. Now, the Dekaranger story takes place in a city called Megalopolis. And on Earth, we see Umeko on a bus that's basically being hijacked by an alienizer. And she starts singing a song in there which is from 5-Man. I haven't watched 5-Man, so I can't really talk much about it, but this is just a little note. And then we basically see the rest of our main cast. Well, main cast of heroes at least. Hoji, Deca Blue, Senchan, Deca Pink, Jasmine, Deca Yellow, Umeko, Deca Pink, as I said earlier. And that's the main team, along with Bond, who comes in later on. And then we have two other characters on the Earth branch. Dogi Kruger, who is the chief of the Earth branch, and also basically the mental figure of this team. He's the one basically in the base, basically giving orders to the team. And Swan, or Swan Shiatori. She's the technical advisor. Basically, she's the one who basically makes a lot of their arsenals and fixing them as well, which is like mechs, new weapons, new technology they use. She also oversees daily maintenance. She's basically the technology person in the Earth branch. And Bond, of course, does show up later on in episode 1, and they all transform. So let's talk about their suits next. Now, even though 3D suits don't show up until later on, we only see 5 as of the moment. I'm just going to talk about them all here, so I don't need to talk about them again once we do get to their debut. These suits are awesome, and I'm sure a lot of you agree with me. These suits are awesome. The helmets are awesome. They're designed differently, yes, but they're similar enough to the point that you can tell this is from the same team. The helmets are cool, and I love during their roll call that there's the sirens on the side of the helmet actually starts ringing. That's a very good attention to detail. I love that. I love the giant numbers, and I love how Deca breaks. I love his suit's color scheme with white, gold, and blue, although blue's not that prominent on his suit. And he has a 6, but it's in Roman numerals, and there's a reason for that, which I'll explain later on once I get to his debut episode. Dogi Kruger, who's Deca Master, his suit is awesome as well, with the dog horns and number 100, because it's part of his roll call, and Deca Swans, which honestly hers may be my least favorite out of these 8, but it's a great suit regardless. Don't get me wrong, it's a great suit. I love the color scheme with white and orange and a little bit of black on there. These are just great suits. Now, something I didn't mention about Dogi Kruger. Dogi Kruger is a Nubian, which means he's basically is a humanoid dog, pretty much. And the team calls him Boss, while Swan calls him Doogie. But yeah. Now, let's move on to the actual episodes. And of course, we also get introduced to their morphers called the SB license. I love these. I love the functionality. I love the look of it. Now, the SB license, they have 3 basic functions that is shared upon all SB licenses. There are additional functions that some SB licenses have, like the masquerade function, which Umiko uses to disguise herself. in later episodes. And then there's also the Mirage Dimension, which basically forms illusions. But each SP license has 3 modes. Every of them have these 3 basic modes: Change, Burn, and Judge modes. Change mode just allows them to transform, pretty self-explanatory. The Burn mode, again, pretty self-explanatory, just acts as a communicator. And the Judge mode. This one's a more interesting one because the Judge mode basically allows the Dekarangers or any SPD member, which the Dekaranger is a part of. I forgot to mention this world to basically manage the amount of basically space criminals out there. An organization is formed which is called the SPD, or the Special Police Dekarangers. The Earth branch is only just one of the many branches because they have branches pretty much on a lot of other planets. Now the Judge mode is interesting in the fact that this basically allows a Dekaranger to just judge a alienizer on the spot. The judgment is only used for alienizers. It's not used for regular criminals because regular criminals are not under the jurisdiction of the SPD. Now, the judgment works like this. Basically, when they activate the judge, this Universal Supreme Court basically undergoes like a trial and basically looks at the evidence and judges whether the criminal should be deleted or executed in this case. And basically the response to that is either a red cross or a green circle. If the cross is given, that means deletion is approved, and the Dekaranger can just straight up and kill the alienizer right there. While the circle, which only happens a grand total of 2 times in this entire show, basically means that deletion is not approved, and they can only at most capture the alienizer. Now, the only way the circle really happens is either that they're just not guilty of any crimes, or if they're judged for a crime they didn't commit. Because one alienizer that's a little bit further on in the show, he was judged, or he was like being judged for crimes of basically destroying cars and murder as well. But the thing is, he didn't commit murder, so that's why he wasn't really approved for deletion. Now, speaking of the judgment, here's something I find a little bit confusing. Like, if you know the reason why, you can explain in the comments, but this is something I sort of didn't understand because I found it a little bit confusing. Not all alienizers are judged. Like, most of them are, but not all of them are, because apparently their crimes are so bad to the point that they were approved for deletion before they came to Earth, which is where the Dekarangers fight and kill them, basically. But I'm sitting here like, doesn't that really apply to a lot of the alienizers in the show? Like, you gotta remember, these alienizers, Earth is not the first place they committed their crimes in. Like, a lot of these alienizers have committed crimes on other planets, and heck, some of them even destroyed like tens and hundreds of planets out there. Why would they be judged when they're on Earth? I thought with these kind of criminals, they would have been judged like long ago already. Like, if the SPD doesn't know anything about them, then sure, I can get that. But the thing is, some of the alienizers, the SPD knows who they are, like what planet they're from and their name, and it's like, why are they only judged when they're on Earth? That sort of just didn't make sense. But that's just something I have with the logic behind this, but the SPD license is still a cool morpher, don't get me wrong. Now, we also get introduced to their headquarters on the Earth branch called the Deca Base. Again, an awesome looking base. The dark hair, the sirens, the SPD logo, and the badge in the middle there. It's just a cool looking mech. What is there really? A cool looking base, because it later becomes a mech. What more is there really to say about it? Now, we also get introduced to the mooks, or in other case, the foot soldiers of this show, called the mechanoids. Now, mechanoids come in 3 different types. These are the anoroids, which are the weakest of the weakest, and then there's the batseroids and the egoroids, which the batseroids and the egoroids are the only ones capable of human speech, unlike the anoroids, because they don't talk. We also we also see, because like I said, Tetmon pilots a giant police car, which is his personal mech. These things are called the Deca machines, which all five of them have. We have the Pat Striker for Deca Red, the Pat Gyro for Deca Blue, the Pat Trailer for Deca Green, the Pat Armor for Deca Yellow, and the Pat Signa for Deca Pink. They don't form the combination mech in the first episode, which I like about it because the first episode helps to show the use of the individual mechs because they're not useless. They all serve a purpose. Just like how also I'll just say right here. No character no character in the main cast of heroes is useless. All of them serve a purpose, which is something I really like about this show, basically. Because there's no like those useless side characters that just do nothing. Like, there's none of that in Dekaranger, which is something I like a lot about it. And of course, in episode 2, we actually see the debut of the combination mecha, or the first combination mecha, Dekaranger Robo. It's an awesome looking mech. It, the color scheme, with the Y and their respective colors, the numbers, and the head as well is with a badge on the forehead. It's a cool looking mech. Not just the look. The initial fight scenes with this is awesome, with it jumping around buildings and it rolling on the floor and like hiding out behind buildings and like, it's just both the fight scenes and the look of this mech is great. The CGI looks a little bit iffy, but you can't really blame it because it was first made like 20 years ago. But yeah, Dekaranger was great. Now, episode 5. This is where we see the debut of Murphy K9, who is basically an advanced robotic dog who has senses that are above any police dog in existence, which makes sense given it's a robotic dog. And the reason why Murphy is introduced at this stage is because the alienizer basically had got something from another alien that could turn people into green gasoline. But the thing is, that alien actually left out and basically just intentionally left out an important component, and as such, the effect was only temporary. So after a bit of time, they reverted back. And it was up to Murphy with his heightened senses, especially the sense of smells, to basically track that component down, so that it won't get into the hands of the alienizer of that episode. Now, let's just say I like this episode because Murphy is not cooperative at the very beginning. He's not. Like they can introduce him, and then he comes out and just pees cool on Doggy Kruger's foot. And I mean, I'm sitting here like, I guess that's how you bring in a disobedient mechanical dog. Now, Murphy's also not only important for this, he's also important for a different reason because he basically forms the way that the Dekarangers can finish off the Alienizer. Because before Murphy was introduced, they basically used their own personal weapons to take out the Alienizers. Like in Bond's case, he has dual pistols, which called the D Magnums, and he combines them into the Hyper Magnum, which is how he finished off the Alienizer by himself. But when Murphy comes in, when Murphy is fed with something called the Keybone, he transforms into the D Bazooka, which for the first half-ish of the show is how they finish off Alienizers. Why? We'll get to that one once we get to the middle. But I also, with this episode, I love Umeko and Murphy's interaction because Umeko was given the mission to basically tame Murphy because, like I said, Murphy was not cooperative at the very beginning. I just love the interaction. Episode 13. This is where we first see, because like I said, Doggy Kruger is the chief of the Earth Branch, and before this episode, he doesn't really leave the Deca base. He's mostly there to really give orders to the team, like tell them to split up, investigate, and basically things like that. like basically what a chief would do. But this is the first time he actually goes out to fight himself, and as a ranger as well. This is the first time he goes to the Like I said, his suit is awesome. And we also see his sword called the D Sword Vega. Because what happens in this episode is Swan gets captured by an alienizer who basically had a past grudge, who had a past grudge against Doggy Kruger. So he captures Swan, basically puts like a bomb vest around her with a fuse, basically forcing Doggy to come out and fight him, to save Swan. And I'll say this, Doggy Kruger may have the most badass ranger entry I've ever seen. Because this man, he first acts like it looks at first like he's losing to the alienizer, and then he taunts the alienizer to shoot him. He blocks the shot with his sword, deflects it at the fuse that's connected to the bomb, basically the bombs that Swan is basically tied to, and it destroyed the fuse. I'm sitting here like, I guess that's one way to do it. Like, you're badass, like straight away. Basically, this sets up an important part of his character. He's a badass. This also ties in a little bit to episode 14, the next episode. Like, even though episode 14 doesn't debut anything, it's important because after they saw how powerful Doggy is as Deca Master, they started to become a little bit, like the main team, they started to become a little bit too reliant on him, which is not what they should be doing because Doggy Kruger is the chief, and his job is to basically give orders and tell the Dekarangers like what to do. Like basically go investigate or go investigate or split up there. He's not supposed to go out on the field as much as the Dekarangers themselves are, because they're the field agents. They're the field officers, basically. Because the Dekarangers initially they just want Doggy to just come along with them because they think with him around that they can pretty much beat any alienizer, which is true to an extent. But this is where they also learned that, because Doggy Kruger, near the end when they fight the alienizer, he just stands on the roof of a building just with his arms crossed with sunglasses on. He just stands there, and the others want him to come help, and he's just like, hmm. And then the Dekarangers just like, they managed to beat the alienizer by themselves. I love how the way that he basically teaches Dekarangers that you can't just rely on me all the time. Like, if you do that, you guys will never improve as police officers because they're not perfect people. They're still learning even in that line of work. And I love that about him. Now, episode 15 and 16. These are Senchan focus episodes. This Senchan meets an android who has the appearance of a little girl. And the reason why the android looks like a little girl is basically because the alienizer who made her basically made it so that with a human look, it will make it easier for her to basically blend in with human society, which makes sense. And the others, upon hearing that she's an android, basically was going to like destroy her just right here. That saves us the trouble. But Sentai like, no, she's an android, yes, but she's more than an android because she has a heart. She has heart, which means she can learn emotions, which she does. But she can smile, and then she learns the emotion of fear, which an android typically can't because it's just a machine. But later we find out this android is actually the brain of basically a mass destruction weapon, and that basically it's Deca Master basically comes out again to basically protect her, while Senchan is along with the other Deca Rangers and just fighting off the alienizer and the threat. And this giant weapon comes out, and it proved too much for the Deca Ranger Robo to handle. So they needed something with a little more punch to it, or firepower. This is where we see the debut of Deca Base Robo. which is the Deca base in its mech form. It's huge. Like, I love in its later appearances, and I think in this episode as well, where it showed the Dekaranger Robo and the villain Kaijuki. Now, speaking of which, most of the Aonizers in this show do not have the ability to enlarge themselves like a lot of other Sentai villains and monsters do. So instead, they ride their own robots called Kaijukis, which is basically what they use in the mech fights, the giant fights. But in a lot of times, also these Aonizers get destroyed in their normal human size, like a lot of them do. So they don't always get destroyed while in their robot or Kaijuki. Now, the database robot, I love this bit, not just because of how it looks and how big it is. I love the art of the character, like the missiles in the fingers, the basically the lasers on the chest and the legs as well. It's just a great mech. It's basically, arguably, out of all the mechs in the show, this has the most power. It's not the most mobile. I'll just get that straight, because they do bring up later on that the database it does not have mobility. Basically, its mobility is non-existent. But yeah, database very cool mech. Now, episode 17. I mentioned this episode purely because of one reason. This is where, because this episode is a Jasmine and Umiko focused episode, the first episode that focuses on the both of them at the same time. And this is the episode that debuts a alternate ending. Because like I said, the usual ending is awesome with Dekaranger. That's a very catchy ending. This features another alternative ending called Girls in Trouble Dekaranger, which after this point, which this episode and every other Jasmine and Umiko focus episode after this ending plays instead of the usual ending. Now, Girls in Trouble. I like this ending. I love the fact that it's actually sung by the actresses for Jasmine and Umiko. It's always nice to see that. Do I think it's better than the usual ending? The answer is no, it's not, but it's still a great ending. I still will give it a listen if I were you. But yeah, because episode 17 basically works in a way that Umeko basically, like I said, because Jasmine and Umeko have different personalities, very different personalities. Jasmine's much more calmer and cooler, while Umeko's much more energetic and extremely like childish in some ways too. And in this episode, Umeko basically tries to become more like Jasmine because that's her way of basically learning from her. She basically dresses up like her to the degree where she leaves her hair down because usually she wears her hair in a ponytail. And she tries to basically do what Jasmine does when she uses her Esper powers, which I'll mention this now. Jasmine is an Esper, which means that by touching alienizers or by touching an object that they have touched, she can basically see their memories and basically like, have an idea of what happened during that time. That's basically what an Esper is. And it's hilarious in this episode because Umeko tries to do the whole Esper thing, and the narrator goes like, Umeko's not an Esper, which means she cannot feel anything. Also, here's another thing with this episode that you need to keep in mind. Every time they use something, for example, they use the Judgment or Jasmine used her Esper powers or anything like that, the narrator always makes sure to tell you what it is, which means even if you just jump into any random episode, there's a high chance you won't go like, huh, what is this? Which is something I like and I've always don't really like at the same time because it does get repetitive because literally every time they mention it, but that's just something to mention. And at the end, so they just learn that Umiko at least learns that it's better to be herself because she can't be Jasmine. And she beats the analyzer by getting herself drunk, which is something that Jasmine wouldn't do because, like I said, Jasmine is much more calmer and cooler than Umiko is. But yeah, That's what this team. Now, episode 21, 22, and 23. This is where we see. This is the trio of episodes that feature on basically on three siblings called the Hell siblings. They're Reversians. Their names are from youngest to oldest. It's Succubus, Bone Goblin, and Blitz. With Blitz appears at the end of episode 21. So we first see Bone Goblin and Succubus first. Now I love this. I love how this episode first initially it happens in two different places because the Dekarangers bar Jasmine fight Bone Goblin and they get beaten the hell out of. And we have Jasmine and Succubus. Now, Jasmine initially tries to fight Succubus, but doesn't work. And Succubus ends up implanting a memory because, like I said, Jasmine is an Esper, which means if she touches something or something touches her, she can basically read their memories more or less. And Succubus basically tortures Jasmine by implanting memories of basically the planets that she and her brothers have destroyed in the past. And Jasmine's Esper powers makes it so that the image is very vivid. And we see it, so it's extremely vivid. And Jasmine pretty much gets scared of them to the point that she basically contemplated to basically become their comrades in the hopes that they'll spare the Earth. And I'm sitting here like, as much as I understand the thinking behind it, I'm saying like, do you really expect them to keep their promise? For people that have destroyed like tens of planets, which is their crime, you honestly expect them to keep their word? But yeah, she does regain her composure at the end, basically believing the idea that justice will prevail, which is basically the idea that Dekaranger team has been fighting with, because they basically fight with passion and emotion. But but they try to take out Succubus and Bone Goldman, but it doesn't work because Blitz comes in and destroys the Dekarangers, even when they have Deca Master with them. So, knowing that the Dekaranger team, the Earth Dekarangers, cannot handle these three alienizers, a Tokuo was sent from headquarters to basically assist them, or basically to take out these siblings. Because now, this is also where we first get introduced to a division in the Dekarangers called the Tokuos. Now, Tokuos are trained differently to the normal SPD cadets, which I'm going to talk about that more in a later episode. But some things that make them different to other SPD members. First, their badge. The regular Earth Branch officers, their badges are silver. Tokuos, their badges are gold. And Tokuos are basically an elite division in the SPD. And they're trained to deal with especially heinous criminals, which the Hell siblings do qualify. And the Tokuo we get in episode 22, because this is the first episode he debuts, is like a break, aka Iratekon, or Tetsu as he's known by. Here's another note. All the Rangers in this show are referred to by their nicknames. They're basically never referred to by their real name, they're referred to by their nickname. However, with Deca Break, we don't actually we hear his voice first, and we see his mech next. Well, he has a giant police bike called Deca Bike, which is a cool looking bike. But what's even more cool than this, Tokusou Henke, it can transform into his personal mech, the Deca Bike Robo. Again, a very cool looking mech. Like, no mechs in the show look bad. This is an awesome mech as well. It's not my favorite, but it's definitely a very good mech. And this mech also features sleeve swords, which are on both hands, which is also a nice touch. And I love the finisher with this mech because the finisher is called Sword Tornado, which basically it slides along the ground, jumps in the air, spins around, and basically slashes the opponent multiple times. Great. Now he does finish off Bone Goblin in this episode, so only Blitz and Succubus are left. And we do see his morpher, which is different to the other Dekarangers, because his morpher is called the Bracelet. Now, how this morpher works, it has the same functions as the SV license with Judge, Confirm, because it can also communicate, and the change mode, because that's how you transform to take a break. But differently with this by basically twisting the throttle part, it gives the left hand additional powers, because this morpher is usually worn on the left hand. Basically gives them additional powers like being able to shoot fire, being able to some electricity, being able to punch really hard or punch really fast. It's a great morpher. I don't like the aesthetics of it as much as the SV license, but I do like its functionality. Now here's another thing to mention. Tetsu does not get along with the Earth Dekarangers when he first comes in. He has this catchphrase called nonsense every time that he doesn't agree with something. It's like nonsense with a finger wag as well, and I love that. It didn't feel it didn't feel like it didn't feel bad. It felt good. It felt good to hear. It just felt funny. Now, there's a reason why, and it's because of the way he was trained. Because he didn't believe in the team's whole idea that justice will prevail. Because, like I said, the main team fights with emotion and passion. Tetsu doesn't initially believe in that, but after seeing them fight with emotion and overwhelm an enemy that they previously couldn't fight or couldn't even touch at that point, Tetsu began to see them in a new light. And this is when he started calling Bon Senpai, because before he was only there to really take care of the Hell siblings, but after they dealt with the Hell siblings, he decided to basically stay at the Earth branch to learn more from them because he felt like he could learn something from them. And also, this is the episode where we see riding Dekaranger Robo, which is just the Dekaranger Robo riding on top of the Deca bike. It's a smart idea. Nothing more to really say about that, but it's definitely a smart idea. Now, episode 26. This is where the first time that Hoji and Tetsu go out on an undercover mission together, because the Alienizer in this one is basically the ringleader of a underground fighting club, more or less. Tetsu goes in because the only way to really meet the ringleader is to beat the champion and becomes a new champion. So because only the champion can see the leader, rather the organizer in this case. Tetsu tries to go, but pretty much gets immediately exposed as a Tokyo, and he gets kicked out. So Hoji has to take this. Now Hoji is the best at marksmanship out of all 6 Dekarangers, because Tetsu, while he's a Tokyo and he's very good at basic hand-to-hand combat, he's not the best at marksmanship. But at the same time, Hoji's not the best at hand-to-hand combat either, as shown because he gets beat the first time. He gets beat really badly. But because he's a stubborn man, as shown in this episode, he trains himself and basically he managed to find the weakness with that alien they was fighting and managed to beat him the second time. And this features the first time that Tetsu dresses up as a woman. Because like I said, earlier he pretty much got immediately rooted out as a Tokyo, so he basically disguised as a woman to basically sneak in, which works. Now during this, he interacts with another alien. Pay attention to this alien because he shows up later on and makes probably the funniest episode in the show, period. And this also features the debut of the combination mecha between the primary mech and the Sixth Ranger mech, Super Dekaranger Robo. Once again, it's an awesome mech. This probably is my favorite mech out of this entire show. Like, I love how it's the Dekaranger Robo and the Deca Bike forms basically the additional armor pieces, like that helmet, the armors on the arms, the legs. I love that a lot. And it has boosters on the back, which is cool because it basically allows it to move really fast, and it has Gatling punches as well. Again, very nice. Episode 30. This is where we first see the Dekarangers encounter the quote-unquote main villain of this show, Agent Umbrella. Now we as the audience see Agent Umbrella very early on, like pretty much at the end of episode 2. although he doesn't talk in that. And he's basically like a weapons dealer. He's basically the benefactor of the alienizer crimes. He's basically there just initially, at least initially, just to make profit out of the crimes that the alienizers commit. This episode features the first time the Dekarangers see him. And basically how this episode works, it features a alien thief who I don't like her at all. She's an idiot. She ends up swallowing what she thinks is a jewel, but it was actually a transmitter for basically a large missile. And the Dekarangers basically had to just save the day once again. I'm sitting here like, wow, I guess. But yeah. Now, episode 32 and 33. This is when the alienizers start to get more powerful because, like I said, Agent Umbrella is basically the weapons dealer in this show. So he supplies these two alienizers with something called muscle gears, which basically gives them more power and also gives the ability to turn invisible. And needless to say, the Dekarangers cannot handle this. They can handle them without the muscle gear, but not after they got the muscle gear. And to combat this, the five of them, because Tetsu and Dekamaster they stay behind to basically deal with the threat. They don't, they get destroyed. The five of them go to another planet to extra training in order to use the power up for this show, the SWAT mode, special weapons and tactics. And I love this training thing because because the first episode, the alienizer in that show ends up killing a boy, and Bond ended up because the boy died in Bond's hand, and Bond basically promised him that he would become the best SPD officer out there. This is where he learned, and as such, during the training initially, that he would pretty much always be the one to run off, and basically just not care. Basically, just doesn't even look back and see whether their teammates have caught up with him. But this is the part where he starts to learn that in order to become the best SPD officer out there, it first involves becoming part of the best team. And I love that growth that he undergoes in this episode. And episode 33, this is where we feature the debut of Dekaranger Swap Mode. Again, the aesthetics with this show is amazing. Like, the swap mode is amazing. The vest, the communicator thing on the helmet, the additional armor pieces, the D revolver, which all of them have, is also nice, and the numbers become their respective color, which is also a nice touch detail. And they can basically finish the D revolver has enough power to basically finish off alienizers. Yeah. Episode 34. This is a Sentai Focus episode, and this is one of those episodes. I'm not gonna say the first because it's not, but this is one of the episodes that shows Senchan being the calmest and scariest person at the same damn time. Because what the Alienizer does in this episode is they're basically three people because they're basically competing in a game, a hunting game, basically where they hunt other aliens or other people that get hold of basically a tracker in the form of a race. And they pretty much treat this as just a game. They treat lives as just a game. And the ringleader, the leader of this is like, you can't touch me because my father is the chairman of the SPD Council and of the Interplanetary Council, and even if you judge me, my father can just speak to the SPD and there's nothing will happen to me. Senchan's not okay with them treating the way that they treat life. Senchan was not okay with it. He's usually the calm and quiet one, yes, but this is one of the times where we see him get pissed. Very, very pissed. And he basically judges all three of them. And of course, with the crimes they done, the court judges them, gives them the X, the deletion approved. And we get introduced to another mech that's used when the Dekarangers are in their swap mode, Deca Wing Robo. I like this mech as well. I don't like it as much as the other combination mechs, which the individual pieces here are called the Pat Wings. Now, this mech, I feel like the only thing that doesn't make him my favorite is probably the color scheme a little bit, but it's still a very cool looking mech. I like this mech a lot. But I think the problem with it is because instead of white, a lot of the color is black, which sort of makes it hard to see the primary color, especially at least in this image, like the primary colors a little bit. Like yellow I can see a little bit, but I can't really see pink in this image. That may be my problem with it, but it's still a good looking mech. And its finisher. This one's probably my favorite finisher because it transforms Tokusou Henge into the Deca Wing Cannon. And the interesting thing is when it's just this mech doing the finisher, it's always in space because this mecha, out of the other mechs, like compared to Dekaranger Robo, Deca Bike Robo, and Deca Base Robo, this is the only combination mech that can fly. So this can basically take Kaijukis and other alienizers into space and finish them off there, like if they need to, which is awesome. Episode 36. This is where because this is a small focus. Swan, like I said, is the technical advisor of the Earth branch, and as such, she basically doesn't leave the database really that often. So, but this is the first time we see her transform into an actual ranger, being the 8th ranger to debut in this show, Deca Swan. She's an adequate fighter, but someone who doesn't really ever leave the database, she's a very adequate fighter. But I love this episode because it shows how, like I said before, there are no characters on this team that feels useless because there aren't. They all serve a purpose, which is something I love a lot about it. And this shows that basically Swan goes to basically an award ceremony on like another planet. And like I said, Swan is basically the one who's responsible for like fixing the mechas, doing daily maintenance and stuff like that. So without her around, the mechs start to not work as well with Dekaranger Robo and Deca Bike Robo because they neglected the daily maintenance, which caused it to not work well at all, really. And basically, in this episode, like it also shows that the reason why Swan is able to win an award with her adventures because this basically features her and like an old I guess someone who she worked with before. Like she won the award, but he didn't, and he basically got like all mad at it, and he didn't understand why because he thought he was better at making things. But in this episode, we find out that's because Swan made inventions to help other people. He didn't, and I love that about it. This episode's good. Like all the episodes in this show are good. Now, episode 40. Remember how I mentioned how that Tetsu initially didn't get along with the Earth branch and how the Tokyos are trained differently? Well, it's explored more in this episode because this is where we see the debut of Lisa Tiago, who is the 9th Deca Ranger to basically debut in this show because there's a 10th one in the movie. And fun fact, this is the only Sentai team with equal ratios of men and women, 5-5 each. And she transforms into Deca Bright. Not the biggest fan of this suit. It's mainly the helmet and really the color scheme. Like I get it's her name is Deca Bright, but it's like I really am not a fan of this suit. I don't hate it, but not really a big fan. Now this is where we find out that, or rather, we get hinted at in Tetsu's debut episode, but this helps explain more. The Tokyos are trained to be much more emotionless when they're fighting criminals, because in their eyes, this is what a perfect officer looks like. So basically, in the start of the episode, Tetsu is because Mon tells Tetsu to save basically a citizen in a trapped car and basically get him to safety. Jacob Brett wasn't exactly happy about it because the way that Tokyos do things is because they fight with basically less emotion or no emotion. They all pretty much always prioritize capturing the criminal over things like saving citizens or tending to injured comrades. And But which is basically how Tetsu started out as. But because Tetsu learned that finding emotion is not a complete detriment, but Dagger Bright doesn't see that, as at least not now. So Dagger Bright basically decided to basically bring Tetsu back to the headquarters and basically retrain him because he felt like that he didn't learn anything useful from the Earth Branch. And he basically learned the wrong ideas, like finding emotion. Until she later on learns that finding emotion is not bad. It's not a bad thing after all. Because Tetsu was able to beat the Analyzer based on information he had gotten from a little girl that the Analyzer hurt in basically his crime spree. Like, this episode is just a very good episode. Now, episode 45. Remember when I mentioned before that when Tetsu first disguised as a woman, there was an alien that was basically interacting with him? Well, this is the episode that I was referring to that it's the funniest episode in the whole show. Like, this is a New Year's episode. And it basically features Tetsu being basically targeted by by an alien who fell in love with him when he first saw him disguised as a woman in that fighting ring. And here's the thing. I initially thought it was, and the present he gave him was like a strange doll that no one would really expect as a love present at all. And they initially thought it was one of the girls, like Jasmine, Umiko, or even Swan. And basically to keep Swan out of the harm's way, Tetsu dresses himself up as Swan. But it turns out that Tetsu was the target all along, and the way we find out is the funniest possible, because Tetsu tries to tell the alien that he's not a woman, he's a man, and basically just takes off his disguise. And the alien was like, "A man? What is that?" And I'm sitting here like, "What? What just happened?" And then we basically know that the alien, with his race, there's basically no gender separation, so they pretty much can fall in love with anything. And I mean anything. And seeing Tetsu struggling against them because because the alien keeps going at him and Tetsu keeps trying to push him back, that was just a hilarious scene. Like, Tetsu is maybe not my favorite character in the show, but he's the funniest. He's like outright the funniest character in the show. Now, 47 is basically the game of the show. 47 is when we first find a little bit of history behind the Earth Branch, because back then in the day, the Earth Branch didn't have access to the Deca suits. And the ones who basically founded the Earth Branch was Dogi Kruger, because he's the chief at the time, Hoji, Jasmine, Senchan, and the first Deca Red, because Bond's not the first Deca Red. He's actually the second one. The first candidate to become Deca Red was Gyoku Ryo, who was also Senchan's partner. Basically, this reveals the past because Jasmine and Hoji are basically the cool ones, like the calm and cool ones. Well, Hoji is not so much the calm one, but they're both cool ones. But the analyzer for this, once they see him, they basically become extremely reckless in their fighting stuff. They basically got mad and they're very reckless. Sort of how Bond started off when he first came in. And this is because this analyzer, when they're previously fighting against them, they didn't have Deca suits back then, so they were much more vulnerable. Jasmine and Hoji got captured, and Gyoku went to save them. But during this process, he got injured basically beyond recovery and had to retire early from the SPD. And Jasmine and Hoji understandably feel very guilty about it. They think that they're the reason why Gyoku had to retire early, which is understandable. But at the same time, I'm sitting here like, I get you feel guilty, but you really shouldn't be fighting the way you are, because you can't avenge him if you're gonna fight the way you are, because it takes Bond to. Okay, this is the funny thing with Bond. Bond basically goes up to headquarters, the SPD headquarters, and basically plucks out the feathers of the chief of the SPD, basically to find out where Gyoku is. because Gyoku basically cut contact with everyone on the Earth Branch and basically didn't contact them for basically a long time. And Gyoku had to come back and tell Hoji and Jasmine that this is not how I told you to fight. Fight with a raging heart but a cool mind. That's how you should always fight. Because that's how they fought you before this as well. And this is where we find out that the reason why Gyoku didn't keep in contact with the rest of the Earth Branch was because he was leading a secret mission with another SPD elite squad called the SPD Fire Squad, which the way you can understand this is basically it's a red Tokyo division because it's made of Deca Reds, and he wants Bond to join the squad because he basically was interested in Bond upon seeing the method that he used to get to find out where he was, which is a very unconventional. Now, Bond in the next episode, episode 48, he wants to join because, like I said, his whole goal was to become the best. But this is where he starts to hesitate a little bit because he felt like if he leaves, this team won't have a fireball to basically keep the team in check. The other members are very by the book in a lot of cases, and Bond is reckless, but because he's reckless, he doesn't go by the book a lot, and as such, there are certain things that only he can do. So Bond basically is worried that the team won't basically be kept in check by a fireball if he leaves. Now Tetsu does volunteer himself to be the new fireball after he leaves, but Bond's a little skeptical whether Tetsu can actually keep his promise. Now this episode features a pretty emotional scene, and here's why. Bond basically gets more or less possessed by an alienizer who fuses himself with his nervous system. So basically, if the alienizer were to get hurt or get killed, Bond will get hurt or killed as well, because the two of them are physically linked together. And we see at the end that basically they all hesitate to shoot him. Like even though Bond tells them to shoot him, because shooting him would basically help to save the Earth population, because the alienizer, his goal in this episode was basically just to turn the Earth into a water planet. Which means it'll kill everyone, because it'll basically sink all the cities and major cities and stuff. And Tetsu comes up, transforms, and punches Bond with his electro fist, which stops his heart, so that the alienizer will come off of him. And then he uses electricity to resuscitate him. This basically shows Tetsu fulfilling his promise to Bond to be the new Fireball, which he does. And the way that the other Deca Rangers felt basically they were sad and basically they break down upon seeing Bond supposedly dying. That was a very great scene because it showed them becoming like a full-fledged team at this point. Because initially when Bond first came in, they didn't really like him that much, especially Hoji. But this basically shows that over the course of the show, they're actually grown to become a full-fledged team and friends as well. They're more than just teammates; they're friends as well. And they fight the alienizer while he's riding a kaijiki. But then later we find out this is a distraction formed by Agent Umbrella, who basically summons a bunch of mechanoids and frees 4 alienizers from prison, and they invade the Deca base. And Doggy Hero has to go out and basically fight against them because he's the only one there who can possibly fend them off. And here's how Agent Umbrella was able to invade the Deca base. Previously, including the first alienizer that they fought, there have been a few alienizers that managed to escape from the Deca base, like break out of it. And as such, they were able to pass on information of what composed the walls of the Deca base to Agent Umbrella. And he knew that the walls of the Deca base are formed by Anubizium. And as such, that's why he was able to organize the invasion of the Deca base. Now, Kruger fights against him, but he loses when the alienizers basically use a dirty trick against him by throwing Swan off of one of the top floors. And this ending is amazing. It's top notch. It's one of the best ending Sentai finales out there because this shows the team fighting to take back the Deca base unmorphed. Like Tetsu's out there riding the Deca Wing Robo because the Deca Bike and Dekaranger Robo have pretty much been damaged beyond function at that point. He's out there basically stopping Deca Base Robo from doing mass destruction because Agent Umbrella has taken control of the Deca Base at this point. The other members go in and they each use their specialities to basically take back the control of the Deca Base because anticipating that there may be a time that basically a villain may invade their base, Swan made basically a backup plan where there's a emergency switch inside Murphy's kennel, and by pressing that, they'll be able to take back control of Deca Base. And seeing them using their specialities like Umiko taking a bath, and then Jasmine's Esper powers, Senchan's handstand, which is a thinking pose, and Hoji's marksmanship and Bond's basically fiery passion, they were able to take back the control of Deca Base and basically kick Agent Umbrella out. And this marks the first time that Tetsu joins the team roll call. Because prior to this, Tetsu basically was having his own roll call, pretty much like how Spawn for that one episode and Mecha Master has always been. But this is the first time he officially joins the team roll call, which just shows how initially he was just there to learn, but he's now fully become a member of, well, feels like he became a full member of the Earth branch. And after they kill Agent Umbrella, they reunite with Doggy Kruger and Swan. Doggy Kruger, who they thought had died, but he didn't. And Bond joined Fire Squad, and Tetsu got officially transferred to the Earth branch to basically become Bond's replacing them, because like I said, Bond transferred to another squad. And then it just showed them just living their normal life as Decas or police detectives. And another interesting thing to mention, this is the first time that it features a Sentai handoff. What I mean by that, basically, like in this case, Deca Red basically hands the torch off to Magi Red, because the show after Deca Ranger is Magi Ranger. Like they do a handshake or do a fist bump, like basically just hand it off to the upcoming Sentai team. And it has become a tradition like all the way till the current time as well. This is the first ever time this has happened. Now, that's basically the sum of the show summed up. Let's talk about the characters, starting off with the heroes. Number 1, Bond, Deca Red. Now, like I said, Bond is very fiery. He's a very fiery character. Like, it doesn't reflect well with the other team members, especially initially when he first came in, because when they were trying to capture the Mechanoid to basically learn something from him, Bond, just the first time he comes in, he not only shows off how strong he is, he also just straight up kills them and like destroys them. And the other men was not happy about it, which is understandable given the fact that he just jeopardized their plan. And Bond, every time you see him, he's pretty much always on that high register. He does calm down a little bit near the as the show goes along, but he's basically always at that high register. Which I'll give him this. His actor does a good job at portraying the cast. Like all the actors in the show are good. But Bond, a lot of his maturity comes after his own show. Which if we factor in every appearance he had after the show, like Gokaiger, the 10 years after, even the Dekaranger vs. Gavin movie, he's a lot better in there because he's basically a lot calmer. Because he's basically matured at that point. But Bond's still not a bad character. He's still very good. And this is another thing I have to give credit to the show as a whole. This show is very good at basically portraying the team dynamic itself, because there's basically a lot of episodes that focus on basically a singular ranger or two. But this show also does a good job, especially with the finale and some other episodes. It does a good job of portraying the team dynamic between them. Speaking of dynamics, Bond is not a perfect character. Like, he is the leader, yes, just because he's Deca Red, but he's not usually the one in charge of things when, let's say, Doggy Kruger's not around. That goes to the next character. Number 2, Hoji, Deca Blue. Now, unlike Bond, Hoji's a lot more professional in his approaches, because he's great at marksmanship. We don't really get a lot of his backs. I think out with him and Umiko, we sort of get the least out of them in terms of backstory, but he's a good character because he's a great marksmanship, and he didn't want to associate himself with Bond in the very beginning because he didn't like the way that Bond acted when he first came in. And this is especially true because, like I said before, Bond was not the first Deca Red. Goku was. And Goku was someone that he respected a lot. But Hoji, also here's another thing with Hoji. He gets the saddest focus episodes, like probably the more emotional focus episodes, because I can think of two examples, and both of these two examples involves him killing someone that's either close to him or close to someone important to him. What do I mean by that? Let's talk about the first example. One of his early focus episodes is with when he basically reunited with his friend back when they were still cadets, and they basically vowed to fight for justice because that's what you do as a police officer, fight for justice. But his friend basically became lost in his ways and basically turned to a life of crime because he didn't really like the way of a Decker anymore, so he basically became an analyzer and used his marksmanship, his shooting skills, because he's a better marksmanship. He has better marksmanship skills than Hoji does, and he basically uses it to earn money. Now, Hoji, even though he knows it's his friend, but he knows that he's the only one who can really fight against him because his marksmanship is really the only one out of the team who can really stand a chance against him. This is a great episode because it showed that he's not an emotionless person. Like he he doesn't want to fight against his friend, but he knows that he has to. And at the end, because during that time they wore braces, and basically his friend destroyed his brace in after they destroyed him who's the alienizer in this episode. He puts on his friend's brace. That was just an emotional scene at the end. And the second time this has happened is when he was in this episode he was applying to be a Tokuo, and his girlfriend at the time was suffering from an incurable disease, and her little brother was basically trying to make a cure, but making a cure involves fatally extracting a nutrient from young women, which ended in their deaths. And Hoji's last assignment to complete before he can officially become a Tokuo is to track down the criminal behind this, which is, like I said, his girlfriend's younger brother. And he knows, upon hearing why he was doing it, you can tell that he's feeling very conflicted on whether or not he should go through with basically capturing Ainizer. And of course he judges him, the and they approve for deletion or execution. And the fact that Hoji basically, upon seeing him just going to attack a group of young women, he instinctively shot him in the back, killing him. This is great because later on you see how guiltful he feels about it. Because seeing like his girlfriend crying over the death of her younger brother, and then you see Hoji in the rain basically feeling sad and clearly extremely guilty about what he had just done, to the point that he rejected being a Tokuo because of the guilt that he felt upon killing his then girlfriend's younger brother. And basically the guilt caused them to split apart. Basically caused them to separate. Like, yeah, and Hoji's dynamic with Bond is also something very good because Bond always calls Hoji Aibo. And Hoji's response pretty much every time is Aibo to Yuna, aka or don't call me partner. And this changes in the end because even though he doesn't want to associate with Bond when he's around him, during one of the early episodes, like the meteor episode, when he thought that Bond had died, he said that he acknowledged that Bond was his best partner. And seeing the way that he basically cries and pretty much almost breaks down is amazing. It just shows their relationship, and it's amazing. And at the end, he calls Bond Bible, basically fully acknowledging him as his partner, which is a very touching scene. Now on to the calmest member, or aka the brains of the group. Number 3, Senchan Dekaranger. Remember how I said he's the calmest and the scariest person on this team? Well, he is. The very first instance you see this is his very first focus episode too, because in that episode, basically, the Dekarangers think this Aonizer, who has been destroying cars, has also committed murder. Because it fit his MO, because all the cars have been sliced in half, this one as well. And it's just that this time it had an actual victim in there as well. Everyone thought that it was this Aonizer that did it, Bond especially. But Senchan after doing some detective work, was able to prove that no, it was not him, but in fact it was her older sister that did it. And seeing the rage that he displayed upon basically hearing no remorse from the older sister, because the older sister basically had no remorse upon killing her younger sister, and he got pissed, understandably pissed, and he basically just went full on and beat the hell out of the Aonizer, judged her, and of course the team finished her off in the process. We also see a little bit of his backstory, where he originally, when he was playing, he accidentally fell into a well, and basically ever since that he became claustrophobic. But in that episode, he managed to basically overcome that because he's a police detective. He has to. There's something that he has to do, so he can't just give up. But seeing that, and also, it's not so much explored in show. It's actually explored a little bit after show, but he does start a relationship with Umeko, which is first really explored in the Madranger and Dekaranger team up. Now, but yeah, Senchan is great, calmest and scariest at the same time. Now on to number 4, Jasmine, Deka Yellow. Like I mentioned, Jasmine is an Esper, and we honestly, out of these members, we probably get the second most. Honestly, out of the 6 Dekarangers, probably we get the second most out of her in terms of her backstory, because she's an Esper, as we all know. When she was younger, because she can basically hear the thoughts, because she can hear the thoughts of people around her, she had no friends, because she was basically different from the rest of them, because she's an alien, she's not human. And because of that, she was basically treated very badly when she was still in school. To the point of she basically contemplated being killed by an alienizer, because she did witness an alienizer killing someone. And the alienizer saw that Jasmine saw him, so he tried to kill her. And Jasmine didn't try to defend herself at all because she wanted to die, until she got saved by Doki Kruger. And it's from that point that she learned that she can't hate herself for this. Like, this power is part of her, and the important thing is to not hate her powers, because that basically involves hating herself in the process. And she's just a great character. Like, her giving the monsters names, even the machines, because the kaijikis actually do have names in the show. Giving them names, that was a fun thing. The way she talks is also great. She's probably my favorite character out of the main 6 characters. She's probably my favorite. This is a great character. Now, she's a calm one, like Senchan. Now, she's not the only female member of the team, and her dynamic with someone has basically the opposing personality with them is always nice to watch. Speaking of opposing personalities, let's talk about number 5, Umiko, Deka Pink. Now, Umiko, like I said before, is very energetic and basically childish and cutesy girlish in a lot of cases. Unlike Jasmine, who, like I said, is a lot calmer. Umeko, in their first focus episode together, it does show that there are things that she can do, like getting herself drunk to basically follow the analyzer, which Jasmine cannot do. But yeah, Umeko is still a good character. I don't like her as much as the others. Like, in fact, out of the basically, I think out of the main cast of heroes, she might be my least favorite. I'm not saying she's a bad character because she's not. She does have her moments of being a badass, though. I'll give her that because there's this episode where it was her and her boyfriend at the time, who was really a scammer, a marriage scammer. Because the Kaijiki attacked at the time when she was supposed to meet him, she basically went full on fire mode, basically charged into the Kaijiki himself, threw the Mechanoid out, and I'm sitting here like, I guess you can. Wow. Like, Umiko them has the moves, and seeing her basically taking out the scammer herself was a very touching scene, and seeing her break down in the end was very nice to watch, because if that basically was the episode that sort of set up her and Sanchan's whole thing a little bit, it doesn't really get mentioned in show a lot, but that's more or less where it first starts off as. And her dynamic with Murphy, her dynamic with Jasmine, and seeing them going out together in that one episode was very good, extremely good. Now onto the sixth ranger, Tetsu Take a Break. Tetsu, like I mentioned earlier, is a Tokuo, and he's the most hilarious guy in this show because firstly of his quirk with nonsense and the finger wag, that was cool, and his cross dressing in two different episodes, cross dressing into a woman, that was also hilarious. There's a reason why I said the New Year's episode was the funniest episode in the show because of him and that alien. But we also get a lot from his backstory because he has 15 years of experience, of training and experience. But he's actually not the oldest in the team. He's actually the youngest out of the 6 Dekarangers. And the reason why is because his parents was killed by an alienizer when he was younger. And as such, he was raised at the SPD headquarters, where he was basically trained and raised there. And he had to basically confront his parents' killer, Spectrum Agent Genio, who he later deleted himself. Seeing him, and Genio managed to escape by basically breaking Tetsu to an extent, to the point that he sheds a tear and he escapes it, because that alienizer can escape through any reflective surface. Seeing Tetsu ultimately having to overcome his basically, I guess, grief in a way, because his parents did die, and basically be the one to finish off his parents' killer and confronting and finishing him off. That was a very nice touch. I really like that. And his bond with Bon, to the because he calls Bon senpai, that was also a very nice touching scene. I like that. Now on to the mentor of the team, Doggy Kruger, aka Deca Master. Badass, badass in fighting, a badass leader, a badass everything pretty much. We do get a little bit in his backstory though, because like I said, he's a very good with his sword. There was one episode, the Christmas episode, in fact, it focused on him fighting against and ultimately killing basically someone that he trained with, because he did have to train to get as powerful as he is. And seeing that his guilt over failing to save him, because his master did tell him that his son was basically misguided in the way of basically the swordsmanship, and it was up to Doggy Kruger to basically save him and help to guide him, which he did fail in. Don't get me wrong. Doggy Kruger is not a perfect character. Like, there's something here he didn't succeed in doing, and this is one of them. But he's just a great character. Like, he's a great mentor. He's a great father figure though, because he's basically the father figure of this team. And I can honestly possibly say this, I think he's the best Sentai mentor out there. I'm sure a lot of you would agree with me. He's basically the best Sentai mentor out there. Now that's the father figure. Let's talk about the mother. Swan Shitori, or just Swan, and Deka Swan as her ranger form. I like Swan a lot too, because like I said, Dogi Kruger is the father figure. She's the mother figure. She's more than just the technical advisor. She's also the mother figure that basically helps the team out if they're suffering from a personal problem, like for example Hoji at the beginning, when he made a mistake, he basically got depressed, and it was Swan basically helped to basically cheer him up a little. Although she wasn't the one who managed to snap him out of it, it was Bond who did. But that helped to show Swan's like motherly figure role in this team. Like all of the heroes cast, they're all great characters. They all serve a purpose in whether it's fighting or just the team itself. This is just the best team, like one of the best teams out there. And that's something I very much appreciate about this. And also Doggy and Swan, they have a little thing, they have a little romance going on. It's not they don't actually get together until the 10 years after special, but it didn't feel forced. I actually quite liked their whole thing. It didn't feel forced in any way, which I definitely appreciate that. Now the villains. Like I said, this show doesn't really have a villain group to focus on, so yet there were extremely notable analyzers like the Hell siblings, Genio, yeah, those two, and the very first one that showed up to an extent as well. But there's only really one really villain to talk about, and that's Adrian Bell. The most despicable man alive ever. This guy basically caused interplanetary wars just to make a profit. Because like I said, his whole thing was just to make money, to make profit of all the crimes. Because he's a weapons dealer. He supplies alienizers, weapons, power up gears to the alienizers out there. He is just this he's an irredeemable person. He's an irredeemable alien. Like no way around it. Like I'm so glad that he died, because it would have been better that he died. Let's face it, it would have been. But he did serve his role as a villain though, as a quote unquote main villain, or more like a recurring one, because he's the reason why that ending was amazing. Well, part of it at least. But yeah, I felt like for this type of show, he's a suitable villain. He's not the best Sentai villain out there, but he's definitely a suitable one. Now, final thoughts. This show's S tier. This show's up there as one of the best Sentai. It's amazing. Great characters, great dynamics, great team dynamics, great mechas, great aesthetics everywhere, with mechas, suits, power-ups, everything. Like this show, there isn't a lot of negativity I can say about this. Like there were little things that I felt confusing, such as initially what I said about the judge mode, but this show is up there as one of my favorites, as you already would know if you watched my first video. Yeah, Dekaranger is a very good show. If you haven't checked it out, you gotta check it out. I 100% recommend this show. Now for what's coming up. Like I said, Super Sentai is not the only major Toku basic franchise I'll be reviewing. So the next video won't actually be a review. It will actually be me continuing talking about my top Toku picks. This time we'll be back with Kamen Rider. Stay tuned for that. Please subscribe, like, and comment what you thought of Dekaranger, or whether you agree with the points I've mentioned. But for now, that's all for today. Bye everybody.